Another very important source or even context of classical Greek political theorizing is how they uphold traditional values. Traditional values are very important for classical Greek thinkers. Not just for classical Greek thinkers, but basically for ancient Greeks. I've said in the previous video that um, it is the one of the roles of the polis is basically to educate its people, to educate its citizens, because the people must remain faithful and loyal to the nomos of the polis. The nomos, as we have said, is basically uh, the customs, the traditions, and even the legal norms, the laws of the polis, right? So these are the nomos. So it's really difficult to distinguish, right? Because for classical Greek people, the nomos somehow has attained a kind of mythological status, so to speak. So there's such a very high reverence to the nomos, to reach almost a kind of mythological status. Well, the assumption here is that there are true moral principles. Look at that. There are the assumption. The reason you have a very high regard to the rule of law, you have very high regard to the nomos, the conventional traditions, the customs, the legal norms of the state, the policies of the state, of the city state. I mean, right? And the reason for this is that uh, there's a conviction, there's a belief that there are true moral principles which men are able to discover, right? Look at that. Let's return for a while to our previous discussion of the law of nature. Remember that the pre-Socratic thinkers believed that there's a natural order to the world. It's a natural law that basically serves as the structure of reality. And these natural laws are discoverable by the human mind, understandable by the human mind, right? And so, in a way, this also connects to how ancient Greeks uh, have a high regard or reverence to the nomos, because they believe that the nomos basically reflect the true moral principles out there. True moral principles are reflected in the nomos of the polis, right? And these true moral principles could be discovered, could be understood, could be evaluated by human intelligence, right? And this basically is reflected in the norms, or in the nomos, the norms, the laws, the customs, the traditions of the polis. This is the very reason why they have a very high regard to these laws. Even to the point, as I've told you, of achieving a kind of mythological status. And as a matter of fact, it's really very difficult to distinguish the moral and the religious, the legal and the religious. It's really very difficult to distinguish that in ancient Greece, right? So that's how they look at traditional values. But nevertheless, in the years that followed the Persian Wars, they basically came into contact with other cultures, with other people, with other ways of thinking, and they began to question their traditional beliefs. They began to question even their nomos. And so there came the idea of relativism. Now, relativism is actually not a new idea. Even in ancient Greece, this idea the idea of relativism already surfaced. There's factual relativism and there's moral relativism. Factual relativism is, of course, the notion that different cultures may have different perspectives, may have different worldviews, may have different moral calculus, meaning to say the notions of what is moral and what is immoral may be different depending on the variations of culture. That's a factual relativism because we see that all the time. But nevertheless, there's a deeper kind of relativism, moral relativism, that could come from factual or cultural relativism. But moral relativism is the claim that there is no right or wrong. That the truth is just simply relative to the person. It depends on what you believe in. Right? We see the modern world being plagued by this kind of relativism. Right? And this is not something new. Even in the ancient times, you already have this. I think the group of people who, in a way, exemplify this kind of way of thinking are the sophists. Well, the term sophist did not really start to be a kind of pejorative nomenclature, right? The term sophist originally, well, it came from the word Sophia, which basically means wisdom, right? Philosophia, right? Pursuit of wisdom. Okay, Sophia, it means wisdom. The word sophos is the adjective which basically means wise. So originally, the term sophists was a term that they used for teachers, those who know a special craft, and this special craft could be taught to other people. The sophists are teachers. But later on in the 5th century, the term sophist is no longer attributed to something of a teacher, but it came to be applied to a group of teachers who are basically teaching rhetoric. The sophists, they travel from one place to another, one city-state to another, and they claim to teach. They claim to teach the things that you need in the daily activities of your life. Of course, we have said that during that time, political activity is very important in the polis because there's an intense political life in the polis, right? And so the sophists basically claim that they will be able to teach you these types of things, and basically they do this for a fee, right? That's why Socrates will say, "No, I'm not a sophist because I don't teach." Right? I know that I know nothing. I'm ignorant. How can I teach? And I don't accept fees. Right? When Socrates was accused of being a sophist. But anyway, we'll talk more about that in the later videos. Okay? So, hence the term sophistry. Right? Sophistry is a pejorative, labeling. It's derogatory. Right? Sophistry means trickery. Right? You're clothing a weak argument with gimmick so that it appears to be strong, so to speak, right? And that's definitely not good, right? Those of you who studied argumentation, studied logic will realize that these are fallacies, right? These are not accepted. But anyway, so in the 5th century, so there came this group of people called the sophists. They claim to be knowledgeable. They claim to know what they are teaching. They claim to know what they are saying. Mostly they are teaching people rhetoric, because during that time in politics you must be very good when it comes to rhetorics. You must be very good when it comes to talking to a large number of people, right? Because you need to persuade them. You need to convince them that you're right and they're wrong, right? Anyway, but of course, Plato in his dialogues basically portrayed the sophists to be charlatans, right? To be frauds. Socrates will engage them in a lot of, elenchos or refutations, questions and refutations, the Socratic method. And later on, they will be trapped in the contradiction, like, Socrates is very good with logic. He uses logic to trap the sophists into a contradiction. And later on, it will be believed that they don't really know anything, right? Because they're trapped into a contradiction. But anyway, the thing about the sophists is that they really don't care about the natural law. As a matter of fact, many of them don't even believe that there is indeed natural law. It's not really that important. What is really important for them is, how you gain wealth, how you gain influence, how you protect your honor, how you become reputable member of the society. And you use rhetoric to do that. Right? Protagoras even mentioned that man is the measure of all things. Not not the objective, there's no objective reality. It's not really that important. But the most important thing is man is the standard, right? Man is the standard to everything. Okay, that's what it means to be man as the measure of all things. If you look at this, right? So you have here Protagoras saying that where the gods are concerned, I am not in a position to ascertain that they exist or that they do not exist. There are many impediments to such knowledge, including the obscurity of the matter and the shortness of human life. And also he would say, good judgment in his own affairs, showing how best to order his own home, and in affairs of his city, showing how he may have most influence on public affairs, both in speech and in action. Look at that. Protagoras, one of the most famous sophists, a matter of fact, Protagoras was even the title of one of the Platonic dialogues. Clearly, you can see there that, Protagoras as a sophist does not really care whether there are natural laws, whether there are, immutable laws out there. It doesn't really matter. What matters is how you govern your own life, how you govern the affairs of your city. It doesn't matter whether you're doing something moral. It doesn't matter whether you're doing wrong or evil. As a matter of fact, evil or the distinction between right and wrong has been blurred, right? I don't know if you see this today with the kind of modern culture that we have. It's not really something new, right? Now here comes Gorgias, another sophist. Plato also titled one of his Platonic dialogues as Gorgias. He argued that nothing exists, that if anything does exist, then it cannot be known. And even if it can be known, knowledge of it cannot be communicated. So a skeptic, right? And Gorgias' extreme skepticism rests well with his belief in the power of rhetoric, which in changing beliefs about the world also changes. You see that the sophist does not really have, a regard for the immutable natural laws, as later on Socrates will focus on this. But the sophists know that these things don't really matter. What really matters is, your honor, your wealth, your influence, your political power. That's what really matters. Right? If there is the truth, well, we'll never know. You see, that's the problem. Later on, we'll see with Socrates that Socrates was well aware of this problem, that the truth is very, 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 very difficult to ascertain. Socrates was not a fool, right? He knew it. And yet, he continued to believe that there is an objective reality. And this objective reality, which Plato will call the forms, basically outline the entirety of human existence. Right? That the cosmos, our politics, our social life, and everything is basically outlined with this. But the thing is, these things are very, very, very difficult to know. Very elusive. Right? Basically, this could be the reason that led the sophists to believe that, well, since we don't know the truth, since it's difficult to know the truth, then let's not know the truth. These things don't matter anymore. Right? Because we can't know them. Why will we focus our attention to these things? As a matter of fact, we'll never be able to ascertain them for sure. Let's just focus on, what's really important, like influence and power and fame and honor and reputation and wealth and so on and so forth. The worldly things that we know. Right? But Socrates is different, of course, as what we will know later on. Right? Socrates will say, well, this may be difficult, but you've got to embark on this journey. Right? Because that's what the good life is. Anyway, we'll talk more about that later. Now, when we talk about nature and convention, there's actually a, a difference between the two. Nature, the Greek word for it is physis. Convention, which could be customs, legal norms, the laws, it's termed as the nomos. Now, the nomos basically refer to these standards which are created by men. Because conventions, norms, traditions, laws, all of these, even if there's such a very high regard that the ancient Greeks has for this, they're created by men, of course, right? Nature, on the other hand, as opposed to convention, this indicates something deeper, something more profound than the laws. The laws are just simply reflecting the profoundness, the depth of nature or natural law, so to speak. It indicates moral values that are rooted in divine sources or natural forces, which basically serve as the fabric of reality. Right? In reference to moral questions, the distinction between what is right by nature and by convention suggests the possibility of a higher law than the laws of existing cities. Right? The law of nature, of course. But the thing about the law of nature is it's really difficult to ascertain. Right? It's really difficult to ascertain. Even Socrates oftentimes are ambivalent as to the real meaning of virtue. Right? But it doesn't mean that they do not exist. It doesn't mean that there are no virtues, so to speak. It doesn't mean that there is no natural law that governs everything, including human relations. Right? And so, these are the sources, or what we can say, the context or origins of classical Greek political philosophy. The polis, traditional values, the law, including laws and customs and traditions. And from here, from these things, there's the idea that the laws or the conventions of the city somehow reflect a more profound law, the law of nature.